Been to a good lecture lately? Lectures sometimes have a bad reputation, but there are ways to make sure that your lectures are really effective. It's all about making sure that lectures are accessible to all students, that they're interactive, and that there's that optimal pacing in mind. Hi, I'm Nancy Fry, one of the co-authors, along with Doug Fisher, of Educational Leadership's column Show and Tell. In the video that accompanies this column, you'll see 12th grade English teacher Brock Arnies as he delivers a lecture to over 100 students. Enjoy!
Seniors, let's go ahead and get started. If I can get eyes and ears up front. Today, we're learning about our fourth and last literary lens, our critical literary lens. This one in particular has to do with looking at the feminist or gender roles sometimes associated with literature. Our learning intentions for today are content. So again, because this is new learning for us, we're going to gain an understanding of the feminist or gender criticism and how it's used in literature. Our language learning intention for today, we're going to identify and explain the use of feminism and gender criticism as a literary lens and its components within the article that we're going to read. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into it. The feminist criticism. So the first component, you're analyzing relationships between the literary text and concepts about power and sexuality and gender. Sometimes this comes in the form of symbols. The other thing that you're doing, right, as a feminist critic, you're deconstructing how an individual's own gender influences how she or reads and interprets a text. Just like before when we were reading about the American dream and what that means for people, every single student in here, although we had an idea of the traditional American dream, that also shifts depending on your culture, ethnicity, background, right? So it's how you interpret literature. That's kind of what that bullet is saying. And how the reader identifies with characters depending on the reader's gender, right? So there might be some characters that we flow more to depending on gender. If you love Katniss Everdeen, right, and you're a female, that might be why, okay? So just some of those kind of things that get touched on as you start looking at some of that with that feminist lens. So as I'm reading, please feel free to make your annotations, ask questions, all that kind of stuff, and then we'll come back together. I'm going to ask you guys to talk at your tables and then look for some people to share out. Sound good? So as we know, the article title, Young Men Embrace Gender Equality, but they still don't vacuum. It's a very clever title. Paragraph 1. Young people today become much more open-minded about gender roles. It shows up in their attitudes about pronouns, politics, and sports. But in one area, change has been minimal. They are holding on to traditional views about who does what at home. Women spend about an hour more a day than men on housework and an hour more on childcare, other research shows. The disparity affects other aspects of women's equality. The additional time women spend on domestic labor, particularly related to children, is a leading cause of the gender gaps in pay and promotions at work. That paragraph itself is saying what? That men and women both want more equality, right? Equal pay, equal job opportunities, but they also want equality at home. But what we've read so far is showing that women still do more at home, about an hour more, both in household labor and childcare. But what paragraph 5 specifically is saying, they are still doing more work at home. That is limiting job opportunities because oftentimes, maybe if a kid gets sick or something happens, who goes home from work instead of the other? The mother. The mother would go home first, right? That could be one of the things that we imply from that paragraph. What does that say about traditional roles?
That kind of gets me thinking about, like, whose fault is it that men still think this way? And it's like, well, their parents are raising them to have this idea that the women have to always be in charge of the house. So then it goes back to, like, how people are raising their kids.
And what they see, right? How they watch their parents interact. I saw pencils moving and people making annotations. So I want to hear conversations at your tables. You're collaborating. Looking at paragraph 5, I want you guys to dive back into that. What is the leading cause of gender pay gaps in the workplace? And what does this tell you about traditional roles?
Because women are, like, supposed to be in charge of the children and cleaning up the house and whatever, that makes people think, like, oh, maybe you, like, don't need to be making as much money because you're not spending as much time at work.
They don't really, or look at the strenuous, like, jobs that women also have. They could be doing a harder job than the man, but they'll still just look at the fact that they're a woman. That's what I was thinking of for paragraph 5.
The common stigma around is that like when women do have jobs, it's always like, oh, they work in a daycare. So it always goes back to this like domestic labor type job. Men are more seen of the hardworking labor, like you were saying, where it's like firefighting and like construction and everything. Like you typically don't see women in those, and I think it also has to be with the stigma behind it. If a woman's put into a hardworking force, it's like they're looked at as different.
All right, seniors, thank you so much for your time today. Tomorrow we're going to talk about our annotated bibliography, which is a part of your research paper. And then I'm going to give you guys some time to sort of do your rough draft and then front load what I want your essay to look like, okay?